What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Jay Ridge, back for another episode of Across the Pod with my main man Tom. We are back after international break and we are ready for game week 8, but there is a lot of conversations that need to be had, a lot of tough fixtures for the best teams in the Prem, and some easy ones for the teams that are pretty shit. So there's a lot of conversations that need to be had as to whether you wildcard, whether you don't wildcard, and then some differential picks for our teams. But Tom, before we get into it, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. It's nice to see you. I feel like we shouldn't leave it 2 weeks without looking each other in the eyes. So it's nice to be back. I think this might be a short podcast again, but we did say that last time and we rambled on for, I think, over an hour. So I'm sure we can waffle on for a bit. But no, nice to be back. And yeah, I'll pass over to you. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so let's start with what we saw in game week 7. The biggest thing for me, really, was Kovacic. And we will talk about Kovacic a little bit because he scored 2 goals for City. There was a few injuries over international break, Saka being the biggest one. And we didn't end up wildcarding our team, which is great for us because we actually did pretty well this week, Tom. We got goals from Mbeumo once again. Jota, I believe, had a goal or 2 assists for us. Oh, he finally scored. Saka was phenomenal. Of course, he did get injured over international break. We were killed, though, by Haaland once again, and we may have to have a conversation about Haaland because when De Bruyne is not playing, Haaland is not overly effective. Gabriel didn't have a great performance as well, but Arsenal did do fine for us in terms of Saka and Havertz scoring goals. But let's get into the fixtures because I think this is the biggest conversation that needs to be had right now when you talk about FPL is you have Arsenal with tough fixtures. You have City as one of the only teams with good fixtures. Liverpool has tough fixtures. Even Brighton, you don't want to be rostering them right now. Bournemouth, you got to get Semenyo out of all your teams. It's Spurs. It's teams like City who are fine. Leicester, Ipswich, Fulham has a great fixture run. And then Wolves, who we'll talk about a little bit as well. After this City game does look quite good. Forest is another team with a good month of fixtures. But Tom, is there anything you want to comment on as far as fixtures? Because I think right now it's so difficult when you have teams like Everton with a massive run of good fixtures, but you don't really want to have too many of their players in your team, especially defenders.
Yeah, firstly, rostering. Can someone translate that from North American to British? But no, I think you're right. I think the issue with this is, and in terms of a lot of people I think shouldn't be wildcarding this week, is the fixture swings just aren't fantastic. The fixture runs aren't fantastic for the big teams. I think the only one out of the big teams you really want to target is Man City. And then again, it's Pep Roulette. So really, who do you want from there? You're looking at having Haaland, Foden, and then one of probably Rico Lewis or Gvardiol, I imagine, is your 3 triple up. The other teams which I've got an eye on for fixtures are Everton, but I'm not going to bring in any Everton players because I think they're dreadful. Fulham, I actually really like their fixture run.
Okay.
And I think you should be looking at Raul Jimenez, and I think you should be looking at either Robinson at the back, or if you need a budget enabler, I quite like Joachim Anderson at 4.3 million for Fulham because I think he's going to be a great asset, really solid, and I think he helps structure Fulham's defense a little bit more and make it a little bit more robust. So I think him at 4.3 million is a really good shout. The only other team that I think has good from the top few teams
Brentford
is Spurs.
is good as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Brentford are good, but I think with Mbeumo and most people have Flecken, you don't really want to go much beyond there. And I really like Spurs' run of fixtures. So I think West Ham at home, West Ham haven't been great defensively. And I think with Son back, I think Ange said in a recent video, I think with Son, Solanke, Johnson's firing, Maddison's looking good. I think their fixture run of West Ham at home, Palace, Villa at home, Ipswich at home, they got a tough City away, but then it's Fulham and Bournemouth. So I think out of those games, you fancy Spurs the way they're playing to be really attacking, score lots of goals. And, you can see them scoring 3 or 4 in every game. And you can imagine Son and Solanke are going to be the main hitters for them. But, I think all Spurs assets are probably one you want to be looking at. I know a lot of people are transferring in Van de Ven and Porro.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure how good Spurs are defensively. I probably, if I was on Wildcard, I'd probably consider them, giving everyone else has absolutely rubbish fixtures. But there's a few players which I'm thinking about this week. So I think defensively, it's a bit of a weird one because I think there's no value in defenders. For me personally, I don't think there's anyone I'm dying to have in Trent or Porro or Gvardiol, who are like the big hitters in terms of like value, I just think there's not much. You should be saving your money going forward, given like for the next 4 or 5 weeks that there's not really many great fixtures for a team that are going to be doing, lots of clean sheets. So I think from the big ones that we mentioned, you've got Spurs and Man City. You probably want either Porro or Van de Ven, and then Lewis or Gvardiol. Anderson, I already mentioned. I really like him as a pick, and obviously, if you've already got Robinson, fantastic. But a good budget enabler. And I also like, your budget 4.0 million defenders as well playing in. This week, I'm going to play Bednarek for Southampton, and I'm going to play Greaves at home to Everton because Bednarek has a home fixture against Leicester, and Greaves has a home fixture against Everton, obviously playing for Ipswich. So I'm just like, why not? Like, I don't see anyone else doing well. Let's just put in the budget guys who have a good fixture on paper rather than just having someone playing against, Chelsea away or otherwise. So that's kind of where my head's at. I've probably lost my head a little bit in terms of the defenders, but I'm just sick of owning defenders that are worth a lot of money and getting no points. But what do you think?
Yeah, this has been one of my biggest issues right now. And I think if you, for some reason you're wildcarding, definitely do not spend any money on defense. Gabriel is really the only player with Bournemouth away that maybe they could get a clean sheet, but you don't want to be having anyone from Liverpool on your team. It's just not going to end well against Chelsea. I don't really like it for either side. I think both teams are going to score, at which point the clean sheets are dead for both teams, and you're not going to want that. I love all your picks. Where are you at on Gvardiol, though? He didn't even make your list. And I think that's a big conversation is, do you want to spend up for Gvardiol, who's probably going to play? Initially we weren't so sure, but it seems like he's going to play now. Or are you still in on Lewis, who I believe had an assist in the last Premier League game as well?
Yeah, I just think I'm more going like the thing is a lot of people have gone with Saliba, with Gabriel, with Gvardiol, and they're safe picks, but they're not exciting. And the second that they concede, which Man City do concede a lot of silly goals every single game. Like, I can't remember the last time Man City kept a clean sheet since like game week 1 maybe. Do you really want to have a defender worth 6 million that isn't going to get you clean sheets? And I know Gvardiol scored, but in this new system, the way they're playing with, he's more defensive than he was last season, because last season Kyle Walker played at right back and he was bombing up the left wing, scoring goals and assisting, whereas he's had glimpses of that this season, so I don't hate him as a pick, but I just think he's not quite going to be as prolific, and therefore I would just rather Rico Lewis. Like, we've talked about it so much, the heat maps, he's just stood up front half the time. Yeah. I'd much rather have a defender that's going to play up front than a defender that's going to sit at the back, and the one up front costs a lot less money. Obviously, if he doesn't play, just have some cover, but for me, I think it's worth the risk.
Yeah, it's ridiculous to think that you could have him or Kovacic for cheaper than Gvardiol, and both are doing much more offensively right now than you're going to get from Gvardiol, when this team hasn't kept a clean sheet, like you mentioned, since the very first game week. Every game they've conceded. Yeah, every single game they've conceded a goal at some point. And it's crazy because it feels like they're conceding first in a lot of their games as well. It's one of the reasons why maybe if you want a Wolves asset, even taking them this week against City, you could bench them, but at the same time, maybe they're going to concede in this game as well. Do you want to move on to your midfielders? Because I'm with you on the defense. You can kind of pick the litter of the good fixtures we kind of ran through. Who has the good fixtures? It's Everton, it's Fulham, Wolves after City. City has great fixtures, Forest does, and Brentford as well. Any of those players from those teams, you have, Greaves from Ipswich and some of the other players, like, they're all in great fixture runs, and you can have them both short and long term.
Yeah, exactly. So in the mid, what I'm going with is there's not many this week. Obviously, just before I get into it, in the mid, I'm excluding like the ones everyone had. Everyone has Saka. Palmer's an option, but has bad fixtures. I have him in my team, and I'm going to set and forget him for the rest of the season because I love him in midfield. Foden I've got in, but it's not like a must need. I think for mids this week, all you got to kind of be looking at from the fixtures is Foden, but he's not looking fantastic. I would just go for, if you have one free transfer, is looking at a Spurs midfielder. And I know Johnson's banging, but I just think Maddison's like expected goal involvement is through the roof. So if I could pick one midfielder this week, I think it's pretty simple. I'd just pick Maddison. Or one midfielder that I'm really on this week is Son, because I think he's back. So if you have the budget for Son, I really like it. And if we get new Saka's out, I'd be very tempted to do Saka to Son, because I think he's going to play well. Spurs play a lot better. it depends if you've already got Solanke or not, but here's the thing. And I put in this just as a little bit of a cheeky one. Mo Salah, the Egyptian king, everyone's transferring him out. He's going to price drop tonight. If Saka is injured, I'm semi-tempted to look at a way to get maybe Salah back into my team in place of Saka, and just have him as another premium where you just don't have to worry. Like if Liverpool score, chances are it's probably going to be him. He's on penalties. I know that fixture run isn't great, but at the point when the fixture run isn't great for anyone, you want to have as many players that are fixture proof as possible. And Chelsea at home is not a fantastic fixture, but Salah is so good in these games. Like you can watch it on Super Sunday. He scores like 2 goals, and you can see Liverpool winning that game 3-1, and him scoring 2 or assisting. So for me, I really like Salah if it's just as a bit of a punt or a differential if we get new Saka's out. Otherwise, then I think I'm going to run with Saka. So that's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah, so I'm going to put you on the spot then, because you brought up Salah, you brought up Saka, you brought up Son, you brought up Palmer, and you brought up Foden. If you had to have any of those players in your team for the next 4 weeks, which one would you choose? Now, I'll remind you, Salah at 2.7 million, 39% selected. Palmer, 10.8 up at 50%. Saka is 10.1, 34%. Son, I believe, is down under 5%. And Foden as well at 9.2 at 5.7%. We talked about Foden last week. He did nothing. But are you ready to go back to the well for Foden again at 9.2, knowing that they have a home fixture, or I guess it's actually an away fixture against Wolves? And we've talked about how Wolves will concede like crazy. But if you had to pick one of those guys, Salah, Palmer, Saka, Son, Foden, who would you have in your team for the next month?
I mean, every game for Man City is a home fixture pretty much. I would pick, and it's a really simple one. I probably wouldn't have said it at the start of the season. And I think a lot of FPL Twitter, like I know he's 50% owned, but I know a lot of engaged managers don't actually rate Palmer and don't have him in their teams. But I would just pick Cole Palmer. I want a player who has the ability to score four goals in the first half. I don't want to have Saka or Salah who's not involved in the game, and even though they're still scoring points, it's kind of like one big moment in the game that they've got an assist from, like Saka's got a lot of assists from a corner and ended up in 5 points or 7 points, and that's contributing to his total points. But you don't have the likes of Cole Palmer who's involved so much for Chelsea. Everything runs through him. He's playing the balls out wide. He's involved. He's on set pieces. Scored that worldie of a free kick. Obviously, he's on penalties. And I think Chelsea are top for like shots. They're top for passes. It looks like they're playing good football. They're pretty dire defensively, but that doesn't really matter when you've got Cole Palmer. So I think for me, he's fixture proof as well. Like he's kind of proven that. So for me, if I could pick one, I would just stick with Palmer. I know a lot of people think, because the bad fixtures, but everyone's got bad fixtures, and that I just think the ability to, like, when Chelsea go up and when they score, and you'd see on the app and you're not watching the game, you expect it to be Palmer that's involved in one way or the other. So for me, I just don't see how I'm going to take Palmer out of my team at any point in the season unless he's injured.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. If I had to pick one player, it would absolutely be Palmer. Even at 10-8, like it just makes so much sense. As much as I want to believe in Foden and what he could be if he finally gets back into his form that he had last season, I'm not ready to trust him just yet, even with the great run of fixtures. Something's wrong with City for whatever reason. They're not producing offensively, whether it's through Haaland, Foden, even down the wings, like it's Doku or Grealish, and it's not really working for them right now. They need to kind of figure that out. But I'm definitely with you on Palmer. Do you want to get to the forwards, and then we can have our debate as to who the hell you select of your 3 Tottenham players? Because I know there's going to be plenty of Tottenham players on our list, and it's about selecting who our favorite 3 are for people's teams.
Yeah, I think forwards is pretty easy. We don't need to dwell too much on it. But the ones I'm thinking, obviously, we'll talk about Spurs, but I think Solanke should be in everyone's team if you can get him in. I'm stuck with Havertz in mine, and I'm kind of torn between playing him against Bournemouth and maybe switching to Solanke, but it's one of the questions I've got for you later on. Haaland, like, if you don't have him in your team, then just delete the app now, because he should be in everyone's team for the best player in the best team for the best fixture run. You don't want to be without Haaland really for the next fixtures. I know a lot of people have gone without him and it's kind of paid off in the last couple of weeks, but just like thank you lucky stars he hasn't scored in the last couple of weeks, and then get him in now. I've seen a lot of people going Delap. Like, there's a question around who the best 6 million forward is. You've got Chris Wood, but I don't like.
You're not a fan of Chris Wood.
I think are okay, but I'm not a big fan of Chris Wood. I just don't think he's fantastic. I think Morgan Gibbs-White being out, we said it last week, or the last podcast, we said Gibbs-White being out will be a very tough thing for Forest to bear with the attacking creativity and the way he makes the game flow for them. And I think Wood blanked. So I can see that happening again. And obviously he was away with New Zealand. Some people are saying he might not start, but I can't see a situation where he doesn't necessarily start. The other ones that I mentioned was Delap for Ipswich. He's doing quite well, but I just don't think Ipswich are that good of a side attacking. So for me, I think the only player you should be considering at that price point is Raul Jimenez. Ooh. And it's someone that we mentioned maybe even the podcast before, but it's someone that's been on my radar for a while. The only reason I haven't got him in is just because I'm going with premium attackers rather than this price point. But I think the fixtures are great for him. He's kind of found his shooting boots again. He's back in form. Like you said, we were chatting earlier, he pinged in that free kick against USA. Yeah. He looks great. And I think the way Fulham are playing with Adama down the right, Iwobi with Smith Rowe, it seems very flowing football, but very much suited to that focal point who's kind of, getting the last touch, getting the header in, which Jimenez seems to be the right guy for it, because it wasn't clicking with Muniz, and now it's kind of clicking with Raul Jimenez. So I think for me, the only two players other than Haaland that you want to be looking at is Raul Jimenez and Solanke.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You didn't mention Cunha, but I do think that if you wanted to add him and maybe bench him this week, or honestly, if you really wanted to start him, I don't think this is the week where you need to cheap out at offensive players like the forwards or even in the midfields. It's more so like we're talking about, and I just kind of was playing around with some wildcard stuff. So Robinson, we already have in the team. Adding in Van de Ven, Madison, Solanke. I still think Rodgers is tremendous value. And Mbeumo has to be in your... I don't care if he's 80% rostered. I do not care. I don't care. He's just so good for Brentford. He has to be in the team. I'm keeping Fleck in. But, you look at our team right now, Tom, and this is the biggest problem with our team, is the team that we have right now, we don't love having Jota. We're unsure about Saka. Mitoma has to go. And if you do have Mitoma in your team, I would highly recommend switching to Johnson. They're the same price. You get the fixture run from Johnson. If you want to have him as one of your Tottenham assets, I think he's probably one of the best options. We have Trent. We kind of want to get out of the team. Gabriel, that we're fine if he stays, but after this week, he kind of has to go because of the poor fixtures that Arsenal has. And then, of course, you got to defend your boy Eze because he's still in the team. We haven't got him out yet. You wanted him in the team. You said he's got to stay in the team. Remember when you were all over him 3 weeks ago, Tom? I remember this. You said, "Oh, he shows up in the big games. He's playing Man United. He's going to score a goal. 0.5 expected goals." And what does he get? Nothing yet again.
That was never said.
That was 100% said. As he shows up in the big games. But I did want to ask you, right? We will go back to the transfers because we do need to make some moves. And so if you had a team like this, where you have a lot of Liverpool, a lot of Arsenal, we have Havertz and Saka, we don't know if they're available, we have Jota and Trent, what are the moves that you would make to kind of mitigate some of the disaster we potentially have on our hands? Or would you stay pat? Because you don't really have to make these moves. I don't mind Liverpool facing against Chelsea. That could be a 4 or 5 goal total game. And then you have the Arsenal side, they're playing Bournemouth. As long as they're available, they're probably going to score 2 or 3 goals and be just fine. But how would you kind of mitigate some of the issues if you have a team that looks like ours?
Yeah, I think the issue with this team is there's just been so many fires throughout that we've just been kind of mitigating them as they've come in. And because of that, we've had the likes of Mitoma and Eze, who we wanted to get rid of probably in game week 3 or 4, but they're just staying in because we've got other players we want to bring in, other players that have been injured, other fixture swings. And I think one thing that's really important for this week is there's no teams that I'm really, really desperate for. There's no moves I'm desperate to make. Like, I need him in my team. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same sentiment we had in the last podcast when we were like, should we hit the wild card and switch up our whole team? And we were like, the team looks good on paper. Let's get some more information and think about it. And we didn't do it. And this team scored 20 points more than our wild card team would have.
Yeah.
So it's like, even we've got 20 points more and we got 2 free transfers and our wild card banked. It's kind of like, now do we just do the same? Or is this the point in which we say, you know what? We've ridden our luck a bit too much with this team. There are, in terms of like the team looking at it right now, who I definitely want to get rid of is Mitoma and Eze and Jota. Yeah. And I think
and Trent
probably, but if we had to narrow it down to the ones to get rid of, I want Mitoma, Eze, Jota out. So it's kind of the midfield, because I don't think there's anyone in defense I really want beyond what we have, other than getting rid of Trent to make more money. And Solanke up front, but Havertz is fine for now. If we're not wildcarding, then I think the players to get rid of are kind of Eze, Mitoma, Jota. But then again, at those price points, we'd have to be looking at Maddison, Johnson as the options probably.
Yeah, so in terms of the Tottenham assets, because we've been talking about Tottenham the whole show, right? Do you bring in a Van de Ven? Do you bring in Porro, who we both like a ton, right? And then you go to the midfield, Maddison, who we really like, and it's a move we could make, but we would have to keep Mitoma, unfortunately. If we go Johnson, who's 6'6", and then we want to get Maddison as well, we would have to get rid of Eze and Jota and keep Mitoma for the Newcastle away fixture, which obviously is not going to be good. Unless we went down further to a Smith Rowe, who's 5'7", to a Kovacic, who's 5'6", or a McNeil, who I know you don't like, at 5'7", but he's playing pretty good as well. I know you don't like him, but he's playing pretty good, so it is what it is. And then there's, of course, going even further to a Rodgers and then reallocating later down the line, because I think as much as I love Rodgers as a player and the way he's playing, tough run of fixtures, good run of fixtures, I think at the price point he's just a player that you can set and forget and have in your team and is always going to perform. But what is your analysis on kind of this situation? Would you go with 2 Tottenham assets? Would you be looking another direction? And would you be looking at addressing even the forward position? Because I'm fine if Saka doesn't play and we switch Havertz down to Solanke. But I don't think it's a transfer you have to make. So which is it for you that you'd be looking at as the must transfers right now? Would it be Eze? Would it be Jota? Would it be Mitoma? Or even potentially Havertz?
Yeah, I like Havertz to Solanke. I like Mitoma and Eze to Maddison and someone else, Maddison or Johnson. I think if I could pick one out of Maddison and Johnson, I'd go with Maddison. Just because I think he's more involved generally. He's on corners and set pieces. And I think the minute Johnson doesn't hit the same sort of form, he's not as nailed as Maddison is. I think Maddison's more crucial to the way Ange plays. He likes him in that kind of 8-10 role. So honestly, looking at this team, it's a disaster. I can't fix it right now. And I don't think you can. I think it's the question for us is, do we wildcard? If we do, then we have to build a whole team. If we don't, then there's no one that I don't think we need to do the Havertz to Solanke move. I don't think I would do any move other than maybe a sideways Eze or Mitoma to Maddison if we can afford it. But I think Maddison's 7.5, so it would kind of be Jota to Maddison. But then again,
it'd be this move basically right here is, I think what we'd be looking at is going from Jota to Maddison and then going Eze to Johnson. Because, we actually could go Mitoma. If you wanted to roll the dice on Eze for one more week, we do have the extra funds to where...
I'd much rather Eze than Mitoma, because Mitoma's just he's been great down the left, but their fixtures aren't great. He's just not getting goal scoring opportunities. I'd rather Eze, who's on pens, on set pieces, involved in every play, and he's just missing the goal for fun, but at least he's shooting at the goal.
Yeah, it's another week. I've been dying to get Eze off the team, and somehow he survives. But
you just keep him.
But now you look at this team, Tom. Do you think this is a team that we can be happy with? We're good with Tottenham for the next few fixtures. I think the defense is great, even though Trent probably going to concede against Chelsea. Gabriel is good for another week. We wouldn't be rolling our transfers, but I think we'd be much happier with the team overall. So the biggest question, right, is the wild card. And I think the biggest problem goes back to the top of the show. when you look at the fixtures and the way that you'd be building a team, you have to get to game week 12 because that's when you get the swing for a team like Chelsea. That's when you get the swing for a team like Arsenal. And so without something like that, I just don't think wildcarding makes sense because you're going to be spending all of your money either on Everton assets, Fulham assets, and probably a ton of Spurs assets just to feel like you're getting your money's worth with your wild card. And so when I look at it right now, I like the transfers we've made. I still think our team needs a bit of work, but I don't think it makes sense for us to wild card until you get that good fixture swing once game week 12 approaches.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I don't think there's going to be any team on paper which looks good this week. I've looked at everyone's team on Twitter. None of it looks particularly enticing. I'm not looked at anyone where like, wow, they've nailed all the right fixtures. And I think for us, it's a case of we just need to bed in, trickle along to game week 12 with our free transfers, hit the wild card and feel fantastic about, wild carding into a good team with good fixtures and good players. Because I think otherwise it's too early for us to make that decision. And I think the game week 12 team just wouldn't be good for the next kind of 4 weeks anyway. So I think we've got 4 weeks just to tick through. We've got the good assets from like teams that do have good fixtures, but obviously if we bring in 2 Spurs, I really like that for the next few weeks. And then we can obviously transfer them out in game week 12 when we look to bring in, like you say, Chelsea, Liverpool,
Arsenal assets, yeah.
And probably Arsenal, yeah, exactly. So that's probably where we're at.
Even just beyond, let's say we go to game week 12, you see Arsenal has a great run of fixtures. Brighton, wow, we could get even back on Matoma and some of those Brighton assets. Wolves continue to have a ridiculous run of fixtures. Wow. Ipswich actually has a pretty good run as well. And then, I think that's when, you look back to that Arsenal 3-pack, right? And whether we go defense with Raya or any of those guys, is kind of what we're looking at. But I think for now, I'm ready to lock these in. Are you ready to lock in these transfers on the show?
I don't know if I'm ready to lock it in, but I think I back you. So I'm leaving the reins in your hand. I don't want to get the receipts 2 weeks later when you're calling me out about Eze. I'm on the receipts 2 weeks later about Johnson. So let's do it. Is it
done.
Locked?
It's done. I did it. Look at this team. All right. So
it looks better on paper already.
Yeah, well, considering we have basically no one on the bench, which is great for us, we still got Gabriel, Trent, and Robinson in our defense. In our midfield, we have Eze, Saka, Johnson, Maddison, and Mbeumo, Haaland, and Havertz up top. But Tom, who's our captain this week? Are we rolling once again with Haaland, hoping that he doesn't blank for the 3rd straight week? Or are we going another direction? I guess with Saka being hurt, it's kind of a last-minute decision to see if he's available. But would you roll with Haaland once again for the 3rd week in a row, knowing that he very well may blank again?
I think it's a perfect opportunity for people to start to feel safe about not captaining Haaland. And we go with Haaland because I think people are going to be like, oh, Wolves away. They see it on paper and it looks bad, but Wolves are terrible. City are prolific, and you can see him scoring 2 goals at least. I predict 2 goals. So I think Captain Haaland. Other people are going to be like, oh, let's go with Solanke captain, or maybe, Havertz or, Maddison. Like, let's just differential because, they have like the regret in their mind for like, if I hadn't captained Haaland last week, I would have made so many more points if I'd gone for Saka. That's in their mind this week of, oh God, I need to chase the points elsewhere because the people who took the risk did well. Now's the time to not take the risk because the best fixture is Wolves away with Haaland. So I just think don't play yourself by trying to chase points that have gone. Let's just stick with Haaland. When he scores 2 goals and we go, oh, well, everyone's got Haaland captain, there will be people that have not picked him this week, guaranteed, and more than normal. So I think we'll be looking nicely at our 22-point
22 points? Let's go.
Yeah, let's see.
I mean, as long as you're guaranteeing it, Tom, then I have no problem. I'm with you, though. I think I would keep Haaland, unless you're going like crazy differential like Johnson or Maddison, if you want to go the Tottenham route. That's really the only direction I would go. Saka's just a little bit too risky right now. I mean, maybe you could captain him and then vice captain Haaland if that's, the direction you want to go. That way, if he doesn't start, you're going to be fine. But I would be sticking with Erling Haaland as my captain's pick. I think that's it, Tom. I think it could be pretty quick. It's one of those weeks where things are difficult. Everyone's struggling. A lot of the top teams have tough fixtures. I think the biggest thing to know really is like just how difficult Liverpool's fixtures are, even beyond the EPL games, right? Even beyond the Premier League games, they have tough games in the UCL as well. And so that is kind of my biggest concern is I got a lot of my personal team has 3 Liverpool assets and they kind of all have to go right now, but I'm not ready to wild card yet. I think the Chelsea team the game against Chelsea is going to be more than fine, but I love that we kept Robinson because now the fixture run is great. I think the team's in a good spot and I love Tottenham assets going forward. Do you have any final thoughts to the people before we get out of here?
Absolutely nothing. It's time to go. We cut it there. We did well. We talked about everything. And yeah, if you're still listening at this point, then you really should have switched off a long time ago. So let's do it. Thank you, Jay Rich, for another beautiful week.
No worries, man. Thank you to everybody for listening. Get ready for game week 8. And most importantly, make sure you like and subscribe for all of our future content. We'll be back for game week 9, where I'm sure we'll be in shambles yet again, because it feels like we come into every podcast the same. We're in shambles. We got to fix it. But that's why we're here, to help you prepare for each and every game week. For Tom, I am your host, Jordan Richards, and we'll see you guys next week. We're out. Peace.